For all intents and purposes, Touch is a kids show. It has bright colors, simple dialogue, juvenile jokes, one-dimensional characters, and a happy ending. And though H2 shares many qualities with its predecessor, it tackles more mature ideas, aiming for an older audience while keeping some of its childlike innocence. A lot of these ideas are worth pondering. The show's liberal use of pornography could have questioned sex in the media and its effects on young men. Its arcs featuring sexual assault and domestic abuse could have critiqued a culture of violence that remains topical even today. And the tragic turns of the story's unexpected deaths could have challenged each character's point of view. But H2 doesn't do any of this, comfortable instead with lazy platitudes and superficial investigations of complex subjects. It tries to advance each idea that Touch introduced, but without establishing a clear path, each one feels like a step in the wrong direction. Many summaries of the show mention that our hero likes both porn and baseball, and the show fulfills its promise early on, with Hiro flipping through nudie mags and skin flicks. Sometimes this leads to clever interjections, like when Hiro blurts out a fan service rule while Haruka is applying a band-aid to her thigh, or when Noda breaks the fourth wall to explain a joke while censoring boobs on the TV. But mostly it's just used to show some two-dimensional skin. And that's all fine and dandy for Hiro and Noda, who can't get enough of their centerfold fantasies, but it seems to bother Hikari, or at least it looks like it should. Of course, she doesn't say anything about it, brushing off Hiro's obsession with quick admonishments or playful jabs. Her reaction is essentially, boys will be boys, and while it's fine if that's her genuine opinion, it lets go of an opportunity to examine how porn is affecting Hiro's relationship with girls. And that's sorely needed, because Hiro doesn't treat Haruka and Hikari as well as he should. There's a scene I mentioned in the previous episode where Haruka hides in a box on top of a roof, refusing to participate in the school's beauty pageant. I have problems with it, but it actually starts out pretty sweet. Hiro asks Haruka to join him for the folk dance at the cultural festival, and when she agrees, he promises to return after the pageant and escort her to the yard. Except Hiro gets sidetracked and forgets his promise, leaving Haruka out in the cold on top of a roof inside a box. It's really not that hard to keep a promise like that. Even if you give Hiro the biggest benefit of the doubt by saying he loves baseball more than anything else, leaving a friend inside a box on top of the roof is pretty inexcusable. He could have just stayed with her the entire time after all. To Hiro's credit, he apologizes by taking her out on their first date at an amusement park the following day, but the episode plays out more like Haruka's realization of her loneliness than Hiro's redemption. And when Haruka reveals that she's been powering through a fever the entire day, Hiro chastises her stubbornness instead of sympathizing with her desire to spend time with him. It's pretty clear that Hiro doesn't think much of her, and while he doesn't have to requite Haruka's love, he doesn't have to treat her this insensitively either. And this isn't even his worst episode with a woman. The arc where we get introduced to Hideo's childhood friend Shu aims for a dramatic thriller, but comes off as tone-deaf and misogynist. Despite Hikari's strong objections, Hideo lends Hikari to Shu for an afternoon, even though Shu threatens Hikari with a knife only a few nights before. Both Hiro and Hideo agree to protect her from Shu, but lose her as Hikari's date with him looks more and more rapey. Hikari thankfully returns home unharmed and jokes with Hiro, pretending to cry and laughing when Hiro shows actual concern. And then Hiro hits Hikari.
And while what Hikari did was mean, it certainly wasn't deserving of violence. And it gets worse, because when Hikari and Hiro meet up next, it's Hikari that apologizes to Hiro for provoking him, saying that there are things that people can only learn through violence. Which is like...
Something like this also happens in Touch. Minami makes fun of Tatsuya when she realizes he's jealous of her relationship with Kazuya, and Tatsuya slaps her in the hallway. But it's Tatsuya that eventually apologizes to Minami, not the other way around. Furthermore, Tatsuya gets heat from his peers who tell him that there's no reason to hit a woman, and Minami allows his punishment to continue on the basis of his stupidity. Touch handles this scene with far more grace than does H2, which suggests that Hikari deserves to be hit for bruising Hiro's fragile ego. Tatsuya makes a mistake, gets punished for it, and most importantly, doesn't blame the victim. Maybe H2 would do the same thing if they cared at all about its leading women, but it doesn't espouse much more beyond patriarchal nonsense glued on to pretty faces. If there's anything that embodies H2's half-hearted commitment to complex themes, it's the death of a minor character shown in the anime and two more minor characters shown in the manga. Most notably, Hikari's mom dies suddenly towards the end of the story, pushing Hiro and Hikari closer together as they mourn. The trouble is, we aren't meant to care about any of these characters. They don't have names we bother to remember, much less personalities or anything to say. The death of Hikari's mom serves as an emotional twist, but it feels more like an excuse to get Hikari in physical contact with Hiro than an actual plot-moving event. Touch only shows one death, not three, but the sudden loss of one of its main characters shifts the plot dramatically, signaling the onset of Tatsuya and Minami's adolescence. The death of Hikari's mom, however, doesn't shatter Hiro or Hikari's innocence, it just further complicates what for a few volumes is a rather stagnant love triangle. Hikari's mom's death gives us a small dose of pathos, but considering how little it matters to the plot, it feels like an unnecessary development. It's these sorts of directionless ideas that make H2 not just less satisfying, but a lot more disappointing than Touch. Porn, misogyny, domestic violence, death, these are all worthwhile topics, especially for a story targeting an age group that's probably just starting to grapple with these ideas. But if H2 didn't want to be a kids show, it shouldn't have taken such a childlike approach to its most important features.